All right, Sweeney's live here with the media. We'll go first to Matt Porter.
Hey, Don, how you doing?
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Two questions, if I could. One, what did you see out of Mason Lohrei this week? And related to his development, did you guys see that coming in the year he had last year?
Well, I'd like to give our scouts all the accolades in terms of recognizing that, he had a longer path of development. He was obviously growing. He hadn't played the position. There's a bunch of things that you put in the context of where he is today and how much room he still has. We're excited. There's a long way to go for Mace, but it'll be a nice challenge for him to go to Ohio State and play against bigger, stronger players as well and faster. But he has attributes, patience with the puck, offensive blue line confidence, running a power play. So, again, in the long stick and the ability to defend, I think he took that to heart this week of the things that our coaches were trying to get him to understand how much harder it is, how much more competitive you have to be on pucks in the defensive zone, but without taking away his creativity offensively and moving pucks and getting into the offensive flow.
And then related to the current roster, are there areas you still think you need to upgrade, or are you pretty comfortable with where the team is at with training camp coming up next month?
Well, I think we addressed some areas that we wanted to. Ultimately, with David making a decision, we're wondering whether or not he may return at some point in time. But that's an open ended. We're constantly exploring options and conversations. The trade situation sort of died down a little bit after free agency. Everybody sort of reevaluates where they're at, but there has been some ongoing prior to that we'll continue to explore. If we can improve our roster, we're going to. But we certainly address some of the needs, and we have some younger players that want to continue to vie for spots and opportunity. I don't think any team believes they're a finished product sitting here in August.
Pluto.
Hi, Don. Two questions. First, you're knee deep in it in terms of free agency and in improving your current roster a week ago, and then here you are with the long view. So when you overlap one over the other, where do you see the organization in terms of strengths, weaknesses, the big picture?
Well, it's been a compression here, Pluto, with several things coming online in the last 3 weeks. Certainly you had to have almost peripheral vision going through this process, but this week it certainly turned our attention to the next wave of younger players. Several players not with us this week, including Fabian and Jelvig and Mantikivi and Svedabak. So we have some players that we're still assessing where they're going to fall in our development pool. But we have several other players, including some of the invite kids that we have a keen interest on and what their overall development is. We addressed drafting another goaltender and making a decision to give Daniel a chance somewhere else. Certainly, we feel highly about where Sway is at in his progression. Daniel, Kyle Kaiser coming on to get a full taste of the AHL this year. So we're trying to address areas. Obviously, we're looking to take the best player in situations, as the draft comes up. But acknowledging that, Harrison and the pick there. Center depth has always been important for us, and because we believe centers can move to the wing. It's difficult for wingers to move to the middle, and we've got some bigger guys in the back end that we're hoping they can continue to develop and impact our club down the road.
Okay, and then the NCAA guys this week, they still have to be on their own dime, right, when they're attending?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just thinking of this big picture. You have all those players, and it's not cheap to stay in Boston for a week, and not cheap for these guys to play for their junior teams, for these showcases, even younger. So from your position, when you think about just how expensive the sport can be, and I'm sure it makes it easier for you when the player pool is as wide and deep as possible, do you think about that globally? Just how prohibitive this game can be for some players, and just maybe some of the challenges that presents you guys when it comes to player selection.
Yeah, it's a heck of a commitment from families to go through this, and obviously the end reward would be for them to be in an NHL lineup and counting against your cap. And ultimately, that's the big payoff for all these players and the investment that they've put in. The sweat equity there, and you give them a lot of credit. But you're right, it's a challenge at every level. and you try and support those efforts in any way you possibly can within the confines of the rules will allow you. And obviously European players have in some sense have a much more latitude in what we're able to do for them. But you do see these players go to a couple of camps and be committed to finding what the best path for them will be at the NHL level and the opportunities that will exist.
Rich Thompson.
Hi, John. What do you expect these young players to bring back from this experience when they return to their respective junior and college programs?
Well, I think everybody's a little unique in where they are in their own trajectory, and whether this is the first time coming to camp or whether or not they've been to several camps, and where they are in their own teams also. But I do believe in what we try and accomplish this week is us learning about the players on an individual level and where they're skilled, and also where they are off the ice, and how they fit, and then vice versa, how the player feels about our organization, whether they've just been drafted or returning, and how much they've grown as a person, how much we continue to evolve, what their opportunity is for them. And then you have the college players that are assessing what their opportunities may be coming when they're deciding to leave college. And we've had several of those players take that path. I mean, Brady Law is a great example of a player that we've also done with other players. Connor Clifton, Kevin Miller started on AHL contracts and worked their way up, and I think Brady's made a year-over-year progression that's great to see. And I think that the college players and the free agent players that come into these camps and they're evaluating how the organization treats them. We try not to treat any player any differently, whether you're a first-round pick or whether or not you're an invite, and make sure we address that with them in the early going, that you're as welcome as anybody. Come through the door, greeting people, our staff. They're here to help them, and everybody's on equal footing. So when you realize that you're trying to make a roster, you're trying to compete for somebody, take somebody's job, that you have to put your best foot forward in all those situations. This isn't a week where we necessarily find out whether anybody's ready to play in the NHL, but we sure as heck find out what their habits are like and how hard they're willing to work, and what type of teammate they're going to be.
Sophia.
Hi, Don. Just as a follow-up, how much weight does what you learned in camp versus what goes on in the season, whether it's BU, BC, the USHL, and what you guys can observe there, does your assessment of these guys have? How much weight does camp have versus what goes on in the next coming months at school? Thank you.
I think their play, Sophia, generally overrides a small sample size of what the week represents. But we do some testing on and off the ice. We see what progression players have done in previous years, and we try and map and track that out, maybe where they can go and the areas that we can continue to support them as they move through their development process. The games, and how well the players play, when the puck drops, is the real assessment level. But when you pull it back and you go through some of these drills and how hard these kids are willing to work and compete, a lot of that resonates with the scouts. And you'll see some players that will excel during the drill situations and other players that excel in game environments. And maybe that's a hockey sense or players on evaluation when the game speeds up. You're just trying to continue the development assessment of each and every player and pass along as much information to them, how much they can receive, how much they pull it into their own environments. When you circle back with those guys, either at the development level with Chris or Jamie, or in this case, Adam coming in and possibly speaking with players down the road, you're trying to make an impression, and most important, they're making an impression on you.
Emily Benjamin.
Hey, Don, what have you seen in terms of the evolution of the need for skating coaches and their impact on the game? And for this summer, an exceptionally short summer, how do you see their impact, particularly on next season, and how guys are improving in that area?
Well, I think the skating has really moved over into a total skill development. You certainly have people that can break down a player's skating. Kuntar is a great example of a player that continues to work on his own skating. He's got a 10-2, a move that he probably was a little bit too default when we watched him early in the year last year, and fortunate to watch BC practice a little bit here. He would do that through the neutral zone. He's now removed that, and only areas that he's using it are mostly in cycle plays and situations that he's able to do it. So again, a progression for him, and an acknowledgement with, in our case, with Kim Brandvold working with players at every level. And again, sometimes it's breaking it down and rebuilding it back up. But I think it translates much more to where the skill overall of the player with the puck in situations, not just evaluating where their skating is. It's a combination of both of them. And you saw the defenseman being put through situations where they're uncomfortable. They have to recognize to stay inside the dots, to get away from the boards, to not cross over in situations. And Kimmer has a lot of drills in that area, and really all the skating development coaches try to attack it in that sense. And a lot of times the player's uncomfortable and how much he's willing to adapt rather than what his general tendencies to fall back into habits may be. Sometimes it's hard to break, but I do believe that those positions have really evolved as opposed to just going through the power skating aspect of making a guy a more efficient skater. I think it's become an area that includes the puck in all situations and skill development overall.
Logan Mullen.
Don, I was wondering if you had an update on John Moore. Is he still on track, and do you expect him to be ready for training camp?
Yeah, John's doing very well, coming out of his hip surgery, back on the ice, really has no limitations, and fully expect him to be healthy for camp.
Where do you see him kind of fitting in next year? He hasn't been able yet to kind of grab a full-time spot in the lineup, and with the transitions and everything, where do you kind of visualize him fitting in?
Well, depth and experience, I think, is important for us. You saw us lose players as we went through the playoffs last year, and I think John, with a wealth of experience, over 500 games in the National Hockey League, he's now hopefully remains healthy. Most important, he's gone through shoulder surgery and hip surgery, so it's been unfortunate for him, and that's part of his inability to grab a full-time lineup spot with us over the last couple of seasons, because he's just had breakdowns in where his body's at physically. And but from a depth perspective and experience standpoint, I think he adds to our group, and can play both sides of the ice. So for us, it's important. I mean, it's going to be a challenge for all of our players in terms of what ice time they're going to get. The incumbents and the new guys coming in, we have to put it all together. But we're fortunate that we've got a player that is healthy and hopefully remains such.
We've got time for two more. We'll go to Connor Ryan.
Hey, Don. Bruce signaled yesterday that Charlie Coyle would most likely be the first guy to step up on that second line. When it comes to weighing those internal top six candidates, what is kind of the hope and expectation of what Charlie can kind of bring to that elevated role, especially if he's got, Taylor Hall and Craig Smith to his left and right out there?
Well, I mean, that's Bruce's decision. The players will generally identify if they're able to move up, whether that's Holla or Charlie in Nosik's case, or Jackson Egan's case, and Freddie, who's played the middle of the ice. And we certainly brought in more depth in that position to create competition, but also, withstand with those injuries. Bruce indicated that Charlie would likely get that opportunity, and we're excited because he's healthy. And coming off a knee surgery where he just didn't have the same jump and level of acceleration for the entire season last year, went through the procedure this year, and his knee's back healthy, and he'll be ready to go. So hopefully we see an energized Charlie Coyle, really the excitement level of playing with Taylor and Smitty in all likelihood starting over there, but it could be other players, whether that's Nick or a younger player that surprises us on the right side. So ultimately, I said it before, we'd likely have to do it by committee to some degree. It's not ideal, and we'll still see if somewhere down the road, David Krejci opens the door back up. But again, that's his own family decision, and there's no timeline, as I indicated before, with David. And we did have a heads up in that, and where we were in the process of trying to fill in from a depth perspective in free agency.
Last question, Jimmy Murphy.
Hey, Donnie, how are you?
Well, Jimmy, how are you?
Good. Just to further on the center position there, just overall, with the present and the future, how do you feel about the depth at the center position right now?
Well, fortunate we still have a number one center in Patrice and the level of play that he upholds. And then it's got to be a little bit by committee and growth. Obviously, we've got Jack there. And if we can't do it, Jimmy, from internally, then we're going to have to look externally. It's an important position. You identified it even through the draft with Harrison. And, you have to have strength up the middle of the ice. I think a lot of professional sports teams would identify that, and we're no different in that regard. You're never comfortable unless you just have a wealth of talent or you've drafted extremely well. Ultimately, you're going to face it at some point in time when players do age out or move on. And in David's case, chose to, address a family situation. So yeah, there's always a little level of exposure and fear that you might not be deep enough. But, again, we tried to address it in free agency. We'll bring in players that can play several positions, and the guys are excited. So ultimately, that's the path we had to take, and the results will dictate whether or not we're going to do it well enough.
And just a quick follow-up, you mentioned Patrice there. Have you begun any talks about a new contract for him?
Yeah, Patrice and Kent Hughes, his representative, and I have had discussions about where Patrice is at. And we'll keep those as private as we do with all the other, and let him decide what path he wants to take. Obviously, it's completely open door for how long Patrice wants to play the game for us, and we'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Sweens. Thank you, media. We'll send out an audio and video link shortly.
Thanks to everybody, and really appreciate all the hard work of the staff and everybody taking part, as well as yourselves, to cover the development camp. Fortunate to have it back online, and obviously during tough times, and the fact that we missed an entire year of it, but we appreciate everybody's support.
Thank you.